let's see. We're streaming. I'll go tell the world. Streaming game dev. Doing underwater stuff. Probably not doing animations since Unity broke them 6 months ago and can't be bothered to fix their shit. Boom. Oh, apparently my Twitch page says the wrong thing. Hold on, I'll fix that in a moment. I'll just go over to Mastodon first. I'm pretty sure I changed it, and then they changed it back. But it shouldn't be too hard to fix. The only problem is that it's... No, that's like a giant... Don't paste the entire tweet. I don't need to search the entire tweet, Google. Let's go ahead and not be playing myself here. Let's take a look. Oh, it does say Sundays. Let's fix that. So I clicked on edit and it popped up 10,000 random bullshit things instead of letting me edit. Saturdays. There we are. And a capital N for New York. And I absolutely don't need your Spotify recent played, your Twitch picks, or any of your other absolute bullshit engagement metrics crap. So let's go ahead and close that down. Thanks for the tip, Monka Time. It's very easy to lose track. So I looked into it a little bit more, and apparently there are only about 8 people that actually use Blender and Unity together, because it's been broken for 6 months and it's not even on the top page of results for when you search for it. There's tons of things from 2013 about people trying to get their Blender installs to work in the first place with Unity. But the fact that they broke, 2019 just broke all Blender animation imports is apparently not being mentioned. And apparently you can only fix it by reverting certain parts of your Unity install back to 2018. But only certain parts. You don't want to revert all your Unity installs. So we're not going to be doing any Blender shit this week because I have to figure out how to do that. It's going to take me 80 or 90 hours of hacking into Unity's deep shit in order to reprogram one line of code that they fat-fingered 6 months ago and can't be bothered to go back and change. With that said, let's do other things. So when we left off, we had just finished creating some sploppy plants. And what I think I'm going to try and do today is we're going to go over into the second room and just do a little bit of spicing it up and trying to get it to feel a little bit better. The second room is the one where we have a lot of pits and holes. So what we're going to try and do is make it so that this area feels a little bit more interesting. And what we really want to do is have life on the front part and then have it feel dead on the back part because they've all been scared away. So to do that, we're going to grab our cannons. There's our gloop cannon. We'll go ahead and duplicate this gloop cannon. And this gloop cannon can be put into room 2. All of this crap that's floating around here is test stuff. It's technically in room 1, but it's not something that actually matters, so we're not going to worry about it too much. So let's just bring all of this over into the room, and then we can fire this gloop cannon to give the entryway a little bit of a nice visual, and then that will be enough to hopefully make the contrast with the later parts of the region feel a little bit more interesting. Ooh, that's really tight. I don't need it that tightly packed. There's someone doing construction 7 feet from my window, if you can hear that. Why is it so tightly packed today? I guess that's just the way it's going to be. Maybe I should loosen it up. Let's go ahead and clear that. What we're going to do is we're going to just increase the spread distance a little bit. There, that's better. We don't need it that tightly packed. And now they're shouting to each other that they've got to close the gate. So, you know. Oh, come on. So basically, we're just kind of decorating this entire area with spiffy life just to see how it looks. And then we're going to take a look and see how it looks. But I really want it to be like you come into this area and it's all green and vital and shiny. And then when you go around that rock, there's just nothing. That's the idea. So... Monk of Time asks if there'll be fish. I haven't decided how many fish there will be, but there won't be any fish today because I have to program freeform browsing fish. Right now I've only got swarming fish, and I don't think I want to swarm. Excuse me. I don't think I want to swarm. I think I want something that's a little bit more freeform, a little bit more like fish picking and choosing. And in order to do that, I have to create those kinds of fish, and it's not ready yet. Maybe I could do that today. But the problem with that is that I really want there to be like a lot of different kinds of fish when you're doing that sort of shit. I don't want to be stuck with just one kind of fish per particle system, because then what we'll end up with is like 15 or 20 particle systems. And if we're going to do that, we might as well make all of the fish individual meshes in the first place. By the way, that flashing blue shit that you're seeing is errors in the shaders. I don't know what's causing them. I guess I should check and see whether it's happening in release candidates or just in this mode here. So even though I added a bunch of greenery into this area, it's... Oh, well, you know what? One of the problems is my window is wide open and the sun is hitting me straight in the face, which is making it hard to see things. So when I have a lot of dense coverage like this, these plants were never intended to be the only kind of life. What they're supposed to be is there's supposed to be other kinds of plants or something in the area as well. So the ideal here would be that that these would have other kinds of details, plants or something coming off of them. But I think I might have just fired them in dumb places because it doesn't really look very good. So let's go ahead and just take a little look at our cannon and see if we can fire them in some way that doesn't feel quite so stupid. Clear. So I fired them without bothering to think about where the player is coming from. But we know exactly where the player is coming from. He's coming out of this mouth. So what we can do is we can, by understanding exactly where the player is going to be seeing things, we can just set these up so that the player will definitely see them. They'll be in a place where the player can see instead of otherwise. But we're also getting very, very bad clustering. So we're going to reduce the clustering. That should allow us to get a little bit more of a kind of spray and pray sort of feel. And that should give us a better set of results. Yeah, see how much wider that is? That's going to give us more green impact without necessarily covering absolutely everything with green. I really wish there was a way to disable the scaling on this, or at least put it in the background, because the scaling has been the one thing on this widget that gets clicked. Like, you can click anywhere on the screen and it will select the scaling part of the widget. So I could do with a little bit of fixing up some of these Unity tools. But I mean, if I have to choose between that and getting Blender to work, let's go ahead and get Blender to work, Unity. That seems like a great idea. I would like Blender to work. And now what I want to do is get this ridge right here. Because I've got lighting turned off, it's a little bit hard to see that it's a ridge. I got lighting turned on. Now I've got lighting turned off. But this ridge is a pretty obvious thing for the player to be able to see. Oh, crap, on a stick. Oh, well. I could probably undo that now that I'm thinking about it. It's okay. We'll just do this the whole setup again. So basically all I'm doing is coding the areas the player's absolutely definitely going to see. And I'm hoping that that will let the player get a feel for the life of these plants. And since it's fairly easy to do, it's a low impact kind of level design for me. I don't need to have like custom setups. I can redo this in 30 seconds if I decide that it's not the way I want it. And this will hopefully also help the player keep track of which direction is backwards and which direction is forwards, so they don't get turned around if it turns out that their direction sense is bad, because I know that that's a very serious problem in underwater games. It's really, really easy to get turned around and not sure, lose track of where you're trying to go. Monk of Time says, is there any movement in the plants that'll help it to feel alive? These plants actually have the movement turned off. It's very easy for me to turn the movement back on if I decide that will help. These plants over here are what they look like with the movement turned on, although they're different meshes and a different texture. But you can see how they're really aggressively wobbling. Let me get a little closer. I bet on Twitch you can't see anything. So you can see how they're pretty aggressively wobbling. I can do the same thing with the plants in this room if I decide I want to, but because they are clinging to the rock face, it's a bit dangerous for me to move them very aggressively because they'll just cut into the rock face. On the other hand, so the issue here is that these are particles. So you might think, well, what you want to do is you just want to move them across their normal. You want to move them, across the meshes normal to try and figure out, that sort of thing. Because if you're moving them absolute X or absolute Y, then yeah, they're going to cut into the rock face. But here's the problem. With a particle system, you don't get the mesh positions or the mesh normals. The only thing you have are world positions and per vertex world positions and the normals. And not even the normals, like as no core object normal, just the normal on the plane that we're looking at. So while I could move them along their normals, it would result in the plant twisting because the faces on one side would move one way and the faces on the other side would move the other way. I guess I could do like a dot product with that and a global up or something similar. But the core problem here is that these are clinging to a rock face and they have no notion, the shader has no notion as to what sort of directions are valid. So if these were doing that plant animation, they would literally just be diving into the rock face. You can see we've got a little bit of a cutoff problem here at the bottom of the plant. I might have to fix up that a little bit better. But you can see that this isn't so bad. These plants are clearly visible, and they are breaking up the incredible rockiness. If I were to add some more stuff, like maybe some fish browsing on these plants or something similar, then what we could do is use that as our life element. And then when you come around the edge here, I'll probably fill this entire thing up with green. And then when you come outside, it's going to be Baja death. That's the idea. So let's go ahead and put in some long plants. If we click on the long plants we've got here, this is the seaweed planter. We're just going to duplicate it and then drop it into room 2. And then we can clear it. No, this is a much older script. That's fine. And we will just move it globally. Shua! You can see how wide the FOV is on this. This was back when I was using an FOV. Wow, this is like really an old script. That's fine. Fire. Fire. Watching it burn. Just kind of populating the area with crap. There we are. Let's see how that looks. So these do move. Hopefully that'll be a little bit more diversity in terms of how it feels. So when you're coming through in this area, wow, we got some slowdown happening here. I do have like some pretty dense stuff that should be culled, not being culled. We'll have to think about that. So maybe I should just take a second and fix that fog plane, or at least disable it. So you can see that this doesn't really feel half as dense as it should. It really has a very sparse feel to it. And the reason for that is because these particular plant meshes are very spindly. And so when it comes time to decorate them, the shader actually goes and fades them out rather than making them dense. So it makes it feel really sketchy. What we're going to do is I think I'm going to go ahead and bite the bullet and fix these up with new meshes, because these are painfully poor. The actual planter is also kind of badly done. Well, we'll go ahead and fix the mesh up first. We can fix the planter up later. So these are, if we're going to do that, we should pull up images of Kelp so that we don't get too confused when we're building the mesh. And basically, Kelp are one of the oldest existent multicellular life forms on the planet in terms of their relatively unchanged visual. And basically what they are is they're a repeated segment, just like what we've got here, except for, of course, the kelp don't float haphazardly. They're connected. Each segment is connected. There's lots of different types. How they look really depends on how much water flow there is, because they're basically just a stalk with leaves. So if there's lots of water flow, then the leaves blow in a particular direction. And if there's not much water flow, then the leaves kind of spread out and give you this really heavy look. We're going to go ahead and model it both ways. We'll just go for a classic green kelp, which is like a dense bundle of stalks and leaves. We could do a single stalk, because that's technically true, right? But I think it makes more sense if we do a bundle of stalks, because it's just a better visual, denser visual. Yeah. I'm looking at, in case you can't tell, there's stuff on the other screen that I can see. There's also there's plenty of other kinds of kelp. This is just like absolutely generic default kelp. It happens. So let's open up a mesh editor for this. We should have some flora, but I believe this is an old file. Nope, it's a new one. Hooray. All right. So this is familiar. Okay, I was editing this folder, this file, like a couple days ago, last time I was here. There. So this is all of the green crap that was stapled to the walls. We've got some here that we're no longer using. These two bad boys are completely irrelevant now. Detail plants A and B. We can go ahead and delete them. These two things were inside of detail plants A and B. They're not necessary either. If we unhide everything, we've got seagrass B here. We want to keep seagrass B, but I'm not sure what happened to seagrass A. I hope I didn't just delete it. I guess we should check. Okay, so I'm not sure which of these is invalid and which of them isn't when it comes to the grass, but I can tell you that we don't have to worry about the grass, not today. We'll go ahead and think about which grasses need to be wutted later. Over here we've got some more stuff here. This is a seagrass cluster, edgeless plant. So I didn't delete seagrass A, it just doesn't exist. It's all seagrass B. I probably deleted it a long time ago. So we're going to go ahead and create a plant. And I guess the easiest way for us to do that would be to start from a cube, because plants are cubes, as everybody knows. What we're also going to do is rotate X -90. And the reason we're going to do that is because I want to model it upwards, but going that way is how it'll actually look in Unity. So if we scale down on everything but the Z-axis and then scale and then move it up by 0.5, no, move it up by 1. There we are. This can be the rough size that we're looking for the stalks, the vertical size, that is. So then what we can do is we can simply cut the stalk into a bunch of pieces. And this might seem a little heavy. I'm not sure how heavy it's going to be. We're going to want to smooth it. And we're going to want to turn on auto smoothing. But we're going to want to turn the angle all the way up. So this is more or less how I want it to feel in terms of a single stalk. What we're going to need to do is create several of these. So just kind of maybe like this. Yeah. And then we'll just kind of kink them. The key here is that when we're kinking them up and trying to make them look good, we're going to want to make sure that we don't move the tops or the bottoms. Only the middles can be moved. So with that in mind, we're going to turn on our proportional editing and just do the job. Just drag it around. Oh, it's set to a very, very large proportional size. We're going to want to fix that. So we're not going to want to ever drag away from the center, I think. I think we might want to try it. Try and keep it so that it's always going in a cool direction rather than making things... Because the whole point here is that this is going to be something where I can probably do this using just crossed quads. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might go back and try that. Let's try it this way, then we'll try it with crossed quads, and we'll sort of do the best of both. If we can use one, we can use the other. There we are, more or less. And now we need a leaf. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. I guess we can do it in here. There's no reason to leave it as a separate thing. There it is. It's a quad. If we wanted to look at the UV map of this quad, it's important that we understand how it is unmapped before we have 1,000 of them, because all the leaves should have the same UV map. There it is. You can see that it's set up so that it uses the entirety of the map. We're going to want to actually reduce that. So, no, here. There we are. And then the other set will be on the right-hand side. But in order to do that, we actually have to understand the scale and direction of this leaf. So we're going to cut, and then we're going to cut Did I screw that up? I did. Hold on. Let's just go ahead and cut like that. There. Yeah, that'll do. So if we take a look at the leaf here, the top half is... Come on. There we are. The top is on the bottom, and the bottom is on the top. So let's go ahead and rotate it. Come on. There we are. So that way this side over here will be the top, and it will be substantially smaller. Now, in reality, these are pretty typical leaves in terms of them having a proper, they're not technically leaves, okay? But they have a proper sort of visual to them with a, a connection on the back end that connects up properly with some kind of leafy stalk. But in terms of us, we're not going to worry about that too much because the leaves should be hidden in a giant pile of leaves. That's kind of the point. All right, so there's a leaf. Might be a little bit large. So we should just be able to stick this leaf in a million spots. Since we have to do both, we have to do leaves that are visible from both sides. But I think that rather than actually do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to use backface culling. But if I do that, they won't light correctly, will they? I think it might make the most sense to delete. Why didn't that go all the way up? That's weird. If we were to delete half of these, then what we'll get is we can use a skin to make depth, and that will allow us to keep modeling everything in the same spot. We can also later revert it. So as I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to model wind-blown or water-blown meshes, and then we'll model the ones that are a little bit more freer. We're going to go ahead and make all the leaves the same size, but I think that this is the wrong size. They feel short, so what we're going to do is we're going to scale them all up on the y-axis. And that means one of them is a little misshapen, but I don't care. There we are. And right now I'm just placing the leaves roughly in spots where they should be. We're going to go through and rotate them and curl them a little bit to give them a little bit of life when I'm done doing that. But you can see that this is a really quite a dense mesh for use as a particle, which might mean that it's not the way we want to do it. We may want to do something a little bit simpler with a different setup. But the basic idea is this this kind of visual. How we achieve that visual might change, but the basic idea is there. So what we can do now is turn on connected only, and then we can just make sure to sort of move these leaves into a nice sort of setup. Oh, that didn't work. That was weird. So in this case, I'm trying to just make this leaf not contact the other leaves, because what we're going to do is we're going to try and move the leaf based on its normals, and I don't want those normals to be screwed up. I want the normals to not cause the leaf to intersect with other leaves. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to decide what I want to do with this leaf. I think I just want to drag this tip down. There we are. And this is a lot like how you do hair. At least if you do hair in one of the more common ways. It's just that it's an endless sort of dance to try and get things to feel right. And the real problem here is that I don't know. I think these leaves are going to be opaque. I think there's going to be no transparency on this mesh at all. Not even like dithered transparency, which means that exactly where they fall, this what we can see is what we're probably going to get. There's not going to be a lot of silliness in terms of a shader that changes where these leaves are transparent and stuff like that. We can have a shader that moves them, which is what we're going to definitely do. But we don't want to have a shader that that makes them transparent. I'm going to have a zero transparency elements, and that'll be nicer for at range. Because at range, the current version gets really, really spotty, and that's due to how the transparency is calculated at range. And the answer to that is to not calculate the transparency at range by not having any transparency. Alternately, we could like do a different setup where the transparency gets more opaque the further away it is, which is what I'll probably do for a lot of plants, but in this particular plant I don't want to try that yet. Now you can see there's a gap right here. I think that's going to be fine. Let's go ahead and just tilt this leaf a little bit though. I think it would look a little bit better if this leaf were blocking that gap a touch. There we are. So we're going to go ahead and name that Seaweed Segment A. Exciting stuff. And now we're going to grab these four bastards. And you can see they're already unwrapped to some extent. We're going to unwrap them again. And then we're going to move them all to the right-hand side. And save that. We're going to add in a solidify, there it is, a solidify modifier. I don't think we're actually going to use it. I'll have to think about it in terms of whether or not it makes sense to have a solidify modifier. See, the problem with the solidify modifier is not only does it multiply the number of faces by 4, it also doesn't. It means that I can't use the surface normals. Yeah, let's not do it. The solidify modifier is more trouble than it's worth. So there's our seaweed segment A. If we pop on back into Unity, we should have access to seaweed segment A. Here it is. Just look, it's making me pull the whole thing in again. I thought that wasn't something that happened anymore. Why did you call it seaweed segment A and then include all of this crap that's not seaweed segment A? The file is called Flora. Why did you pull the whole file in and call it seaweed segment A? God, Unity is weird. Unpack, because I just want this one, and the rest of you can go fuck off. There we are. So this is seaweed segment A, and here it is. And you can see that we've got this issue where it's mostly transparent because we don't have backface culling. So we're going to go ahead and turn backface culling on, but in a minute or two. I want to get a chain going first. So we're going to need to have a material for this. Oh, I thought I told it to soften everything. That's better. So we're going to need a material for this. Here's our flora material. We have some sea grass, but we don't have any seaweed yet. So let's go ahead and create a new seaweed shader. The mailman's here, I can tell, because they are smashing up my mailbox. Come on. Come on. There we are. So we're going to want to create a new material called seaweed. Just drop it right on. Now, obviously, this material is currently nothing, but what we can do is start to set it up. So if we turn off the backface culling, we'll immediately get some extra depth to it. It'll come in from every direction. But the problem with turning off the backface culling is that the lighting gets screwed up on the back faces because it's considering the lighting as pointing the other direction. And that might be okay, or it might be something where we have to turn off the lighting. We'll have to figure out what we want. But this is going to be an opaque setup, and here's our paint. So if we're going to have a texture, there's going to be our property. There it is. That's going to be albedo, and then we're going to have a tint. Then we're just going to multiply those things together. And there's our albedo. Easy enough, right? We can also do a number of other things if we would like. But we need to make sure to set this up properly because right now the render path is all and it needs to be deferred only. When it goes to deferred only, we're going to lose a lot of this functionality. I don't believe that transmission and translucency are available except on forward. So that means that we can't use, you can't use those. But if we were to go over here, you can see that now it's quite green, except that it's quite black. See how there's a really, really heavy difference in terms of how green and how black it gets. For right now, let's just test and see how this feels. So if we come down here, let's go ahead and turn off room 1. That'll save us a little bit of processing power. And then we've got some seaweed in room 2 somewhere. There it is. And all we really need to do on the seaweed planter is to replace the mesh. Instead of coral stone, it's going to be seaweed. There we go. And instead of the coral mix A, it's going to be seaweed. And then we're going to hit play, and we're going to see how it looks. Our seaweed, how it looks. Arr, 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 arr. It's still pretty frail. It doesn't really have the density I want. In fact, it seems to have substantially less density than the old seaweed. Is it just pointing the wrong way? I think it might just be pointing the wrong way. Yeah. Okay, so the seaweed orientation is random, and that's giving us a really splotty look. Also, the seaweed particles are really small. All right, so for some reason the particle set is... I know why that is. That's because the old version had larger meshes, so obviously we were using a smaller particle size. Oh, that's better. That's more like what I had in mind. So the idea with making it so they don't perfectly line up is simply that it'll give us a really, really dense visual. And this is kind of how I had envisioned it. I don't really know if this is going to hold up in terms of... Oh, actually, I kind of like it. We're using dots that go, or rather leaves that only go one direction. As you can see, they're kind of wind blown. I think what we're going to want to try and do here is change that. So we're going to come back out here into this and duplicate this, move it to the side. We're going to call this seaweed segment A wind blown. And then we'll come over here and we're going to go ahead and spread these leaves out. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to select a batch of leaves, like say these 3. And we're going to duplicate them and then rotate them around everybody's favorite 3D cursor. Hold on, let me move some stuff around here. There we go. And we can just basically repeat that process. So, boop, 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 boop. And then we will go back in and we'll move them around to hide the bald spots. Yeah. So let's go in and do some more rotating. Just grab a leaf. All right, so here's a bald spot. See that? So we're going to fix that up by grabbing a leaf and simply moving it over there. And then we can maybe... There we are. Not really any bald spots left. There's a couple of patches that aren't quite as nice as they could be, but it's not really a bald spot anymore, which is enough for me. Is that a bald spot? That feels like a bald spot. Let's go ahead and grab this leaf and duplicate it and bring it down and fill in this bald spot here. Now is where we'll really get to see where the back face culling fails, because these leaves are not all arranged in a way that makes sense for back face culling. I can see it's pretty square. I'm not sure I like it being quite that square. Let's pull this leaf out a little bit. Not that one, this one. Basically, I'm just trying to get it so that it doesn't feel super fake from any direction. That said, I've made a very, very dense set. This is like, what, 500? Where does it tell me? It used to tell me right up here how many particles, or how many verts I had selected. Now it doesn't seem to tell me anymore. Oh, there it is down here. 500, yeah. So 400 of these verts. So that's quite a heavy particle. But let's take a look at it, see how it feels. Oh, we're going the wrong way. This way, please. All right, so you can see just how dense that is. It's like really aggressively thick. It's actually probably too thick. Now the reason that it's a little too thick for me is because it's very, very uniform. This doesn't actually feel too bad in terms of how it looks when it's dense. But once it gets a little bit ragged and off to the side, it starts to feel a little bit tubular, if you know what I mean. Like these are very tubular. But maybe if we start to introduce some motion, that'll help a little bit. I'm not sure though, because the motion will be mostly up and down. Let's try it. So we've got the seaweed shader here. We're going to introduce some motion to the ocean. Oh, it's open already. So here you can see there's local vertex offsets, and that's what we're going to be modifying. To do that, we're going to need a time. Chibooey. We're going to need a time scale. Wobble speed. Now that's wobble speed. I don't want that. Here we are. And we're just going to go ahead and have that between 0 and 1, and then we'll give it like something like this. We'll just drop that into scale here. Once we've got the scaled time, what we can do is give it a big old sine wave. That'll bring it down to a -1 to 1. Because a sine value works on radians, what we're actually getting here, time is not going to be every second. It's going to be more like every 6 seconds. So if we bring our wobble speed up to quite a high value, it's probably still going to be fine. Once we've got a sine value, what we can do is we can simply move the normals across that. So if we get the normals, we have to remember what we've got and what we don't got. We have world normals. We do not have any other normals. Similarly, local vertex offset is a lie. It's not local. It's global because we don't have any local values. Now let's go ahead and just see how that feels. It feels really dumb on this guy. But that brings up something pretty obvious. I need to scale the amount here. I don't want to wobble scale. There we are. So this is wobble scale, and it's going to be between 0 and 1. Bring it up to maybe 0.17, and then we're just going to multiply. Now this is the part that wouldn't work if I was using a skinned mesh, because it would end up, the leaves would get fat and then thin rather than going up and then down. That's because of the particle. If it wasn't going to be a particle, we wouldn't have this issue, but because it's a particle, we're going to have this issue. So you can see they sort of pulse now, which isn't really what I want. What we need to do is introduce some randomness to this value so that it's not quite so bad. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that fog, or at least turn that fog window off. Yeah, you can see how what's going on here is they are not moving along their normals in the slightest. You can see how they're, rather than moving in their normal, they are... I don't think they're sliding along the normal. I think they're sliding along their tangent. I'm not sure why that would be. It feels really bad. But there are a lot of tricks left up in our sleeves here. One of those tricks is that we actually only want the mesh elements to be moving if they are these in this particular region. This is, I believe, low X, low Y. So we're going to go ahead and modify those based on the X and Y values. We're also going to bring in some noise on a per particle basis. So to do that, we're going to come down to the renderer. We're going to do custom vertex streams, and we're going to add in a random stable XY. This will give us 2 more values that we can use in our shader that are going to be per frond set, meaning that we'll get some nice wobbling. We can also use we can add in the Z value and all sorts of stuff. So that's going to be fun. So let's see. First things first, let's put in the UV modifier. So to create the UV modifier, we're going to need that UV texture coordinate. And we're going to want to, if the UV is lower, if the UV U is greater than 0.5, we're going to want to clear it. So we're going to go ahead and use an if, and I hope that this is one of the cheap ifs. I can never remember which one's the cheap if here. So here, we take a look here. I believe the if is if B is higher than A. Oh yeah, it says right down here. See that? So if we set this to be 0.5, if A is greater than B, then 0. Otherwise, it's going to be V. Like that. See? And then what we're going to want to do is simply multiply here. And that should mean that the tips of the leaves move. Yeah, see? So the core branch never moves. It is actually animated via a different set of constraints, which I may or may not keep. It's actually, the particles are moving based on a very simple engine for that. But you can see that we still have a whole bunch of synchronized particles. It feels like the ocean is breathing, which is quite a strange sort of... It's definitely better, but we don't want the ocean to feel like it's breathing. Let's go ahead and turn off that plane. We've got a fog plane that's causing us some grief. I'll bring the fog cards back once I fix them, but that's nonsense. It's given us all sorts of flashing. All right, so now if we go over into our plants again, we're going to add in a rolling value to the time, and that value is going to be, let's just move this. It's going to be the world position. There it is. And we do have the world position. At least we better have the world position. If not, we're in trouble. And we're just going to add in the... the y value, which I believe is up. I can never remember which way Unity thinks is which. We'll know real soon here as soon as we hit play. The problem is that we may not actually have the world position. I might be remembering it wrong. So we should see animations rolling either up or down. It looks like they're rolling down. Yeah, they're rolling down. So we're going to invert that. We're also going to radically increase the variety in the scaling of these pieces, because I think it's going to be cooler if they're a lot less reliable. So right now we're doing a scale between 0.8 and 0.5. Let's bring that down to 0.2 and 0.5, or 1.5 that is. So this is not going to be an add, it's going to be a subtract. And I think we can increase the wobble scale. Let's see. I think that was more or less what I wanted to do. Let's try it out. Now the last thing we can do is we can offset based on each individual particle's values, because each particle has passed a random value. That'll give us a much more random feeling. I think I don't really want that. We'll find out in a moment here. Yeah, so now you can see the animation is rolling up. The speed at which it's rolling up is a little bit strange, because it's rolling up 1 meter a second always, regardless. Maybe what we'll do is we will nerf that value based on one of the randoms. Yeah, we're also going to want to modify it. So make this a property, and we'll tell it that it is rolling speed, and it's going to be between 0 and 1. We'll go ahead and make it like 0.4, multiply them together, and we're also going to need more texture coordinates. This time we're going to want the W and T. So T, no, that's V. There we are. T is it's the same as W. They're two random values between 0 and 1. That should be fine. Let's go ahead and multiply here by T. So if we were to bring in the texture coordinates one more time, P. Boom. Hopefully this will make it feel a little more organic, a little bit less forced. Yeah, so this is the density I was hoping for, and now the animations no longer feel too aggressively mechanical or lively. They kind of feel like plants now, rather than, I don't know, giant tentacles or something. Yeah, this is a lot more lively, as you can see. Now, we don't have any sort of material on these leaves, so they look really dumb. In addition, it looks like our camera can very clearly get a strong close-up of them, at which point it'll be clear when they're clipping through each other. We'll have to think about exactly what we want to do, but basically the idea here is I put on a lot of these because I was thinking about the old version. These do not need to be this thick. But the basic idea is that when you come through all of these lively elements, and then you come out the far side, boom, nothing. That's the idea. I think it'll work. Let's go ahead and clear the seaweed planter and try again, because we just got too much crap in it right now. So clear. I am trying. This widget has the worst setup. So right now we don't have the option to choose. Oh, here it is. 12 is just too high. Let's bring it down to 5. And then we can also increase the FOV a little bit. And then fire. Watching it burn. And then we'll come over here. Let's try it out. Looks like we got some errored ones. Those are at the surface, which is not of any use to anybody. Yeah, so this is no longer hyper dense. It's now relatively reasonable. What do you guys think? Does that feel like it might be a decent visual? I think I'll need to put in some more work over there because it looks like there's like some place to go. And I want the opposite of that. I want you to think that there's no place to go over there. Maybe I'll fill it with more of these. Munkatime says it looks pretty good. It's good enough for me. The only thing I'm left wondering is whether or not my sine wave should be remapped so that they never go negative on their yeah, let's go ahead and try that. Sure, I mean, there's no reason why kelp can't be literally opaque. You can have a tremendous amount of kelp, but I don't want that here. I want this is the whole point here, is it serves a purpose, and the purpose is that I want the player to feel like they're coming from someplace lively into someplace dead. I don't want them to feel like they're coming from someplace strangled by greenery. That's a little too lively. So we're going to go ahead and open up our seaweed shader. Here it is. And we're going to remap the sine wave. So here's our sine wave. And just put in a remap. And put it on. There we are. And previously the remap, rather the sine wave goes from -1 to 1. What we actually wanted to do is go from, move it, there we are. We actually want to go from 0 to 2, or maybe from 0 to 1. 0 to 1 sounds better. So -1 to 1 to 0 to 1. That will hopefully keep the leaves from crossing as much, since they're kind of migrating in the same way. They're migrating different amounts, but they should no longer be actively conflicting, and that's kind of what I'm hoping is the case here. Oh yeah, I can already tell that this is better. There's still some crossover, but it is so much better than it used to be. In order to actually prevent crossover, I would have to lock them into all being the same size, or using other kinds of mechanisms. I could also do some tricks with normals to try and hide the fact that they're crossing over by making them all have the same normal. But I kind of like this choppy, bright, and then dark. You can see how the light is hitting the whole thing, but I've got those dark leaves and then I've got the bright leaves. That gives it a look like it's got depth, even though what it actually is the rear clipping plane. What is it called? There's no culling. There's no back face culling, and the back faces end up black because they're considered to be facing the opposite direction. So when your light shines on them, the back side of these leaves thinks that it's facing the other direction. Fortunately, the back side of the leaf, because of how I set it up, the back side of the leaf is on the inside, which means that what I get is basically a self-shadowed setup. It sort of feels like there's depth here, because I don't have self-shadowing actually turned on, but everything on the far side is facing away from you, and therefore is black. And that should give us a nice sort of visual. I'm not 100% sold on this yet. I really wish that Unity would let me control the shadowed areas, because what I'd really love to do is set up the shadows as one color and the brights as another color, but Unity does not give you that kind of control unless you do custom lighting. And the custom lighting is not great, so we won't do it. We could definitely add a lot of detail by putting in a texture. Switch over to Phoenix Wright for a second while I set up the texture system here. All right, bring it back. Boom. So this is Seaweed 01. Oh, I don't want to delete anything. I want to delete this there. This is Seaweed 01, and it's got to be opaque. So there we are, it's opaque now. First thing we're going to want to do is lay down a layer of just noise. We're going to go ahead and give it an underlying blue, because that way it'll feel like it is a... that's far too small. There we are. This will feel a little bit more natural in terms of how the shadows look when the shadows are playing off of a blue like this. There we are, perfect. And that's just noise. So this side is the stalks, which we do want to stay pretty dark. So we'll just go ahead and dash. But what we should probably do is like actually grab the right-hand side and just limit ourselves to that. And just go bloom, 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 bloom. And then what we'll do is we'll invert that, and then we will add in a value here. And this is our leaves. In fact, I think it's a little bit wider than that. I think like this is our leaves. And so for this, I think we're going to want to do just a mostly opaque wash here. And we're going to darken the leaf base. And brighten the leaf tip, because that will reflect, that'll be like how light actually works. And then what we're going to want to do is put a spine down the middle of the leaf and then fork out a bunch. I don't actually know the fastest way to do that, so I'm just going to pull out my tablet and do it manually. So to do that, we'll use mapping pen, sure. And we'll just, it's too thin, make it thicker. There There we are. Actually, we can just go because the tip is smaller on the mesh. So we have to remember that although I'm drawing a leaf, this whole segment is squashed into a leaf shape. So with that in mind, we can then just go. Cookie says that my sound effects are amazing. They are. I am a professional sound effector. Yeah, I don't know how to draw without making stupid sound effects. It's just part of the experience. There we are. So we're gonna go lock that in and just brighten up some of these elements that are near the tip. I locked it the wrong way. Lock that one. Just because that way it'll be a little bit less severe. I don't want it to feel super, super aggressive. Here we are. That's better. And maybe we'll go back down to here and darken this area up a little bit more. There we are. All right, so that's our Seaweed 01. Very, very basic setup. Caught my mic. There we are. All right. Cookie says that they want to use those driving sounds in their next game. I mean, if you want sounds that I've made with my mouth, feel free to go take them. I'm not terribly concerned about maintaining the rights to those. But if you mean like any of the sound effects I'm using in my game, I can't let you use those because I don't own them. I own some of them, but I don't own all of them. So, Seaweed 01. Pow. And you can see that that's so much more realistic. So let's go ahead and take a look. And the seaweed is now considerably darker, specifically because I added in a lot of black, or a lot of darker colors. Yeah, that's way more realistic. And as the camera gets close, and you end up looking at them, well, when they're in the dark, you can't see them. Let's see if I can find some that are not in the dark. Is the sunlight really coming at that weird angle? I mean, I thought that was a pretty bright area, but I guess not. Anyway, you can see that they are a lot less flat now. So when you get close to them, you can see the veins. And that's a little bit better than what we had before, which was just complete garbage. We still have some problems, but it's not too shabby. The leaf tips are a little bit aggressive. I think we're going to change the weighting there. So let's open up the shader. So what we do here is we multiply the leaf by the V value. V is between 0 and 1, with the tip being 1 and the base being 0. I don't actually want this to be between 0 and 1, so we're going to use a remap. What I want this to be is between So really what I want to do is square root it. Pow! Is there like a square root? Yeah, square root. Square root is notoriously not fast, but it should be okay. Monk of Time says, can I normal map a particle? Yeah, you want to see how it looks normal mapped? Let's go ahead and reopen the shader editor that I literally just closed because I'm an idiot. And we'll go ahead and create another texture to plume. We'll call this a normal map. And then we're going to want to normal map it. Boom. And then we're going to drop it right into our normal. Splow. Save that. Now, the reason I didn't do that before is because if you leave it empty, it errors out. It does some garbage normal map stuff. So what we need to do is take our seaweed, duplicate it, mark it as a normal map, say generate it from grayscale, and then apply it, and then come back over here and drop that new normal map element here. And so now what we've got is veins that are inset. So what we actually want to do is multiply that normal map by -1. Unfortunately, I don't believe it allows us to go negative here. No. All right, so we're going to have to do it in the shader, which I mean is not catastrophic. So this scale will be -1. There we are. Now, in theory, the leaves should bulge out rather than in, the veins. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to need a normal map, but it's good to have that option. So you can see that this gives us a really, really heavy ridged appearance when the light hits it from the side, which is why I didn't really want too much of a normal map, but what we'll do is we'll take that normal map value and we'll bring it down to like -0.2, because your light is going to catch the leaves from the side a lot, and it's going to make the normal maps really, really pop. Yeah, that's a lot less aggressive. Might be a little bit too unaggressive, but the basic idea is already there. We can tweak it later if we need to. So this is a radical improvement. If you wanted to see how much better it is than when I started, let's go look at the old versions. I turned them off, didn't I? I can turn them back on, though. It's not a big deal. Yeah, so you can see that this is where they should be. It turned off room 1, and it left like 90% of room 1 turned on. Clearly, I'm going to have to be a little bit more aggressive about putting things that are in room 1 in room 1. Where is room 1? There it is. Let's try that again. So, there's the new version over there. And here's the old version. These spindly little jerks are what I was using before that I thought looked great. Now, there are times when I do want to have spindly little versions like this. To the point where I may make a version of the seaweed mesh that is spindly. But I think for now, let's switch them over and we'll see how room 1 looks once it is properly set up. I don't think we need these guys anymore. These were our testing meshes. So our particle system here, we can switch over the various pieces. Excuse me, seaweed, sweeweed, sweeweed. There it is. Chow. And then we're going to go ahead and drop in a seaweed material. We got too many seaweed materials. All right, so now it should look good in here too. Oh, except for I've left it quite small. So it's going to end up looking a little bit anemic, but let's see how a little bit anemic looks, because maybe that's what I want. Yeah, so, wow, that's like pulsing. See how aggressively it pulses? What's it doing? Why is it doing that? So there's a lot of things wrong with this. One of the things wrong with it is that it's not properly animating on the z-axis. Or the y-axis. Another thing that's wrong with it is that it is scaling? What is it doing? That's weird. If we look at the other guys... Oh, you know what? I forgot to set up the custom vert streams, so it was erroring out. Not a big deal. We'll go ahead and set them up. Pachow. That's better. I wouldn't say it's ideal, but it's better. So by scaling them down, we end up with a much lighter kind of coverage, which might be good and might be bad. It really depends on what we want. My problem is that some of these clusters really look super, super dense and heavy, whereas some of them look really, really anemic. And I think that might just be a difference in what part of their animation they're in. Because when the leaves are moving along their normal, what they're doing is they are flapping down. If you see that, see how they're flapping down? But since we are multiplying that motion by a random value, it's not really moving along the mesh. It's kind of just popping in and out of existence. So to fix that, we're going to just set this with a remap. And basically, we don't want it to be that noticeable. Oh, that's the wrong way. I never want to feel like there is a cluster of seaweed, like along the vertical bar. I want it to feel like a contiguous, flopping mess rather than being like a noticeable one spot. And by reducing the amount of control that the animation... I reduced the animation between 0 and 1 before, depending on their random value. Now it's between 0.5 and 1, which is much less aggressive. So it's the same animation, same setup, but it no longer feels hyper blobby. It's still a little blobby, but it's not hyper blobby. So if we were to go over here into the shader, we've got between 0.2 and 0.5. I'm going to bring that up to 0.3 and 0.5. Oh, geez, sneezing straight into the mic. Actually, I turned my head aside as much as I could, but when you sneeze as loud as I do, no mic can survive. Yeah, it's a lot less anemic. I think what I want to do is... what I really need is meshes that can be a little more complex than this, which I can do. There's nothing saying that these particles all have to be from the same particle system. I could create 2 particle systems and interweave them or something similar. But this is a very nice basic setup. It's very trivial. If we were to switch that out for the wind-blown version, I wonder how it would look. So you can see just how anemic the windblown version is in comparison. But one of the problems here is that the windblown version is being blown in every possible direction rather than being blown in the direction we actually want it to be blown. And the reason for that is simple. We're using a random value here between negative 180 and 180. If we turn that off, we should find that they are all facing the same direction. We can also change that to something besides, we could like make it wobble between 70 and 110 or something. It doesn't really matter. So this is what it looks like when we use the wind-blown setup with an absolutely static value for the direction that they're being blown. That's not a bad direction for them to be blown, actually. It's almost correct. So it looks like 0 is very close to being the correct value. But the leaves are acting a little bit strange. You can see how it's very weird. There's something wrong with the way the leaves are working. I'm not sure what it is. I guess it's okay. Let's go ahead and randomize it a little bit. So to do that, we're going to turn the start rotation back on. And instead of negative 180 to 180, we're going to make it like 0 to 30. And that might have to be like negative 30 to 0. I'm not sure which direction is which. And we can also increase the size if we want to make it a little bit more impressive. Well, this is definitely pointing the right way now. So I judged it correctly on which direction it should point. The leaves are much too uniform, so let's go ahead and boost it up. Say 0.5 to 1.5, see how that feels. Oh, that's much thicker. Basically, I just don't want it to feel like the leaves are growing in sheets, because that's not how they grow. They don't grow in sheets. So by having the size vary much more wildly, it should make the various pieces overlap in unreliable ways. And rather than feeling like it grows in sheets, it should feel like the wind is blowing it in sheets, which is more in line with what I want. So there you can see, this is how it looks. You can see that you can definitely tell that there is some nonsense happening with the cores. See that? So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back into Blender and find that windblown version, and we are going to do some cool shit with it. The number one thing we're going to do is we're just going to wrap these leaves around the front so that they constantly hide the stems. Why is it trying to cut shit? Stop trying to cut shit. For somehow the cut tool got selected. I'm trying to select that point. For some reason it's not getting selected. That's fine. We'll just keep going until it does. You know, it might be easier if I turned off X-ray. How do I do that? Shift Z? No. Shift X? No. Control Z? No. That's undo. Alt Z. Alt Z. Sounds German. Do. So we especially want to hide the upper and lower elements. Those are the ones that are going to be the most obviously wrong. So that's why we're going to take this entire leaf and convert it over to a hiding feature. And this guy also. And lastly, this one. And that should be enough. Let's see how that looks. I didn't get one for the bottom, though. I need to take this guy, duplicate him, flip him, and move him down. That should do it. We're coming up on the end of the stream here, so if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. I'm kind of hungry. I wonder what I should eat. Maybe I'll go out for curry. So you can see that creating those leaves really bulked up the feel of these. And they no longer feel like they're not lining up properly. They feel like they're being blown in the wind. See? That's the idea. I mean, it could still be better, but the basic idea is sound. And since we're always moving the leaves along their normals, we're never going to end up cutting through the shielded sections because the leaves are moving away from them rather than towards them. And because the leaves' normals are all facing the direction of the wind, i.e. towards me, they're always going to light up properly when I shine my light on them, and we're not going to think that they're backwards. Yeah, this is actually not a bad setup. I'm going to take some screenshots, and then we can call it a day. Come on, buddy, get out of the way. There's a screenshot. Just... Monk of Time recommends curry as well. Screenshotted. Screenshotted. And then I'll get one of the other ones. what sort of kelp forests do we want to take pictures of? I think that this side looks a little bit more picturesque. What sort of angle do we want? Composing the screenshots is the hardest part of making a game. All right. Pasted and pasted. Screenshot Saturday. No, Saturday. Kelp time. Toot. Tweet. Exciting. All right, well, thanks for stopping by, everybody. I'm going to go eat some stuff in order to not die. Always a fun task. See you next Wednesday or next Saturday, depending on your preferences.